Hi, thank you so much for joining us here on Making a Difference. I'm Melissa Billy Clark. The COVID pandemic increased the vulnerability to domestic abuse, and it was at its high with an increase at 20 to 30% this year. And according to American Psychological Association, in some regions, rising at 62%. In our previous video, we spoke to Lena Kasparian, who was the victim of a domestic violence relationship. We sat down with national psychotherapist Dr. Robbie Ludwig to get into deep questions as to why this occurs and how to safely get out of it. Dr. Robbie's expertise can be found on networks such as CNN, HLN, Newsmax, and Fox. She is also a collaborator with Preferred Health magazine. Take a look. Why do men and women commit domestic violence?
There was an interesting study about men who battered women, and men who battered women were highly sensitive to criticism. So if they sensed any kind of critique or feeling devalued or disapproved of or not respected, they couldn't handle that and they would break out in a rage. Really, if you scratch the surface, a lot of these men have very low self-esteem. And so they need to make the woman worthless in order to feel like they are okay, which is why we often see the cycle, right? The cycle of beating and then the honeymoon phase almost, where there's a lot of love bombing going on in order to keep these relationships kind of stuck in a cycle. Women abusing men is something that is less seen, right, because of the physical power that women have versus men. But it does happen, and very often men feel a lot of shame talking about it because it doesn't feel masculine. They feel emasculated. But the same thing, there's a feeling of rage and domination, and they need to devalue the other in order to feel okay themselves.
During COVID, we've had, it's been the highest of domestic violence. We can't leave our homes. Advice, it's very hard for people to leave. So what advice would you give without their life feeling threatened, or where can they go if they are in the middle of a domestic violence partnership at home now?
It's such a good question. And I think women need to make a decision that keeps them safe. So they need to decide if they're going to stay in the home, not to raise issues of separation, to try to figure out a way to stay safe, as safe as possible, and also to reach out to advocacy groups that are really well trained in helping women navigate the next step for themselves. But I think the most important thing is not to say to a partner, I'm leaving you, because that is when women are most at risk, sometimes when they do leave, because that just confirms what these men fear the most, that they're worthless and they're unlovable and they're not enough. So there are great groups out there. I would recommend calling one of the 800 national programs out there, speaking to a counselor when you can't be heard, when you have a moment of privacy, and finding out what steps make the most sense given your circumstances.
Thank you. In Lena's case, we have Lena Kasparian on our show, and she said that she was identified by the media not as a victim, but as a murderer. And my question to her was, if the roles were reversed, would it have been a different scenario? What's your intake on that?
Yeah, well, I think, we're very used to seeing men killing women, right? That is a narrative that we're very familiar with, that seems to make sense. So it's like, oh, there's another marital homicide, some crazy, violent, abusive guy who went too far. Or it just seems to make sense given our cultural consciousness. But when we see women are the killers, that's something that spikes our interest, that almost becomes novella-esque. It becomes like a soap opera. And especially we see this with attractive people, right? When there are attractive people who are killers, we're really interested in them. And the press can choose to make a storyline that's very compelling. Whether it's true or not is something different, which is why it's so important for any case not to be tried in the court of public opinion, because it's a very biased, slanted perspective.
Absolute. Now, how does one recover after they accidentally kill somebody? It could have, in Lena's case, or they kill him with a car.
Well, I think the two situations are very different.
Okay.
If you are accidentally kill somebody, let's say on the road, there's such a feeling of guilt and shame and maybe feeling like you deserve to be punished in life. And it's a very tricky, challenging situation. Mm-hmm. But there are support groups for people who find themselves in this horrific circumstance. There's a psychologist who was responsible for a homicide accidentally, and she created a support group where people can talk and share and use their experience to do good, to somehow use the experience to make a difference. So I think that's always the best defense, right? When something happens, to try to understand it in its entirety and make a difference, make peace with what happened, and to try to do good and make a difference, either by helping future people who are in that situation or choosing something that you feel passionate about to do good. Now, in Lena's situation, I see it as entirely different, because they used to call it the battered women's defense. And very often these women are in danger of being killed. So it's survival. It's not an accidental murder. They didn't intend to murder. Murder wasn't even in the thought process. It was, it's kill or be killed. And very often that's what we're looking at. And it sounds like the court also viewed it in that perspective, that Lena was trying to save her life and maybe even save the life of her children, and things could have gone very differently. But because she's very attractive and she's not smiling, and maybe even because she's a brunette, it's very easy to cast her as the evil woman who killed her husband. And in the video that you sent me, yes, we saw the mother, right? Her husband's mother just falling apart in front of the cameras. And as a mother, it's heartbreaking. Your heart goes out to somebody who's just overcome with emotion and, is breaking down. That's very compelling imagery. So, but the bottom line was, she was in an abusive situation where there's post-traumatic stress and her life was on the line. So she did what she needed to do to survive.
Yeah. Wonderful conversation I had with her. Now, if someone is listening that attacks their partner, but they want to stop, what would you tell them?
Well, I would recommend going to therapy, first of all, to find out where this behavior is coming from, to try to understand it and replace it with more pro-social and healthy ways of communicating. And there's also a group for batterers, right? People who are battering, to understand what's going on and better ways to manage their feelings of worthlessness and their feelings of rage or not being respected. And so there are groups out there. Now there's like really a group for everything, and there's anonymity. So if somebody really wants to take the next step, there are people out there who can help them.
Thank you so much, Dr. Robbie. You can find Dr. Robbie Ludwig on Facebook Live, on Facebook Watch, Talking Live with Dr. Robbie Ludwig. She has a new show. It's called Bite Size on Apple, Spotify. It's 10 minutes of her very compelling and beautiful interviews. Montel Williams. Who else do you have on there, Dr. Robbie?
Larry King, Candace Bushnell, and we're going to have a lot of exciting people up there that have not only a national presence, but an international presence. So it's very exciting to be able to share my fantastic guests with a different audience, and Hopefully they'll enjoy it and sign up. It's free. We'd love to have you be a part of our community.
And please head over to her YouTube channel, Dr. Robbie Ludwig, and she has a book about marital homicide, Till Death Do Us Part. Dr. Robbie Ludwig is one of my mentors, and I thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you have a vegan product, make your vegan claim official with the only accredited vegan trademark in the world. Visit www.beveg.com. That's www.beveg.com to apply now. Making a Difference is sponsored by Preferred Health Magazine. Please visit www.preferredhealthmagazine.com today and subscribe.